This is the story of how Detective Amaka Okafor discovered that the truth was hidden in a child's drawing. And trust me, by the end of this investigation, you will never look at a child's artwork the same way ever again. Welcome back to the channel, my people. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about the innocent drawing of children. This is a story from the heart of Lagos, Nigeria. A story that began with crayons and paper and ended with secrets that have been buried for 30 years. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let me take you on this journey. This one is going to be intense. I hope you're prepared. So, our story begins on a Saturday morning in Ikoyi, one of Lagos' most affluent neighborhoods. Detective Amaka Okafor wasn't supposed to be working that weekend. After 12 years of solving cases for the Lagos State Police Command, she'd promised her partner, Inspector Chidinma Okonkwo, that this weekend would be about anything but crime. But you know how this thing goes. Detective Amaka was a woman in her late 30s, sharp as a blade and twice as focused. She had a reputation in the force, the one who never let cases go, the one who saw patterns where others saw chaos. Some called her obsessive, but she called it thorough. That morning, she was browsing through an estate and at a beautiful colonial style mansion on Banana Island. The house had belonged to one Mrs. Fumilayo Adeyemi, a retired primary school teacher who had passed away at 84, leaving no children and no immediate family. Chidi, her partner and closest friend, was there too, shaking his head at her. Amaka, you have a problem, oh, he said in that his pigeon inflected way, holding up a vintage lantern. This is what normal people do on weekends. They buy old lanterns and feel nostalgic. Amaka smiled, running her fingers along shelves filled with old books, wrapped in that distinctive smell of old paper and camphor that reminded her of her grandmother's house in Enugu. But then, as these things always happen, she found something that changed everything. In the corner of what used to be Mrs. Adeyemi's study, Amaka spotted a faded cardboard box labeled Class of 93 in black marker. Inside were dozens of children's drawings. The kind primary school teachers keep because they can't throw them away. You know the type now? The one with houses with smoking chimneys, families holding hands, bright yellow suns with smiley faces. But one particular drawing stopped Amaka cold. It was more sophisticated than the others, done in colored pencils by someone with genuine talent. The image showed a massive compound house, the kind you see in Ikoyi or Victoria Island, with high walls, security gates, and a distinctive three-story building with large windows, very detailed, very specific. But what caught Amaka's attention wasn't the house itself. In the upper window of the third floor, barely visible unless you look closely, was a small figure, a child's rendering of a person. But the details were disturbing. The figure was lying down, not standing, arms spread out, and there were dark marks around the figure, deliberate, heavy strokes in black and red. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, My House by Chidinma Okonkwo, age 9, March 1993. Now, if you're from Lagos, if you know your city's history, that name should ring a bell because Chidinma Okonkwo was the little girl who vanished 30 years ago, the case that shocked Nigeria, the mystery that was never solved. Amaka felt her heart racing. Chidi, she called quietly, come and see this. Her partner walked over, squinting at the drawing. Nice picture. Kid had talent. The Okonkwo estate, Amaka said, her mind already spinning. The mansion on Adeola Odeku Street. It's been abandoned for decades. Chidi's expression changed immediately. Wait, Okonkwo. That was The Okonkwo's disappearance, March 1993, Chidinma Okonkwo, age 9, vanished from her bedroom in the middle of the night, never found, nobody, no leads, no suspects. The case went cold. She turned the drawing over with shaking hands. On the back, in adult handwriting now, presumably Mrs. Adeyemi's handwriting, was a single sentence in Yoruba, then translated in English. The child tried to tell me. God forgive me, she tried. Now, let me give you the background because this case was huge. If you are alive in 1993, you remember when this happened. Back at Amaka's apartment in Yaba, which I should mention looked exactly like the workspace of someone obsessed with unsolved cases. She and Chidi spelled out everything they could find about the Okonkwo's case. The walls were covered with case notes, photographs connected with red strings, timelines written in different colored markers, maps of Lagos, missing persons reports, everything. Your apartment looks like a Nollywood movie set, Chidi observed, not for the first time though. So now here's what happened in March 1993. Chief Emeka Okonkwo was one of the richest men in Nigeria, a businessman with interest in oil, real estate, and telecommunication. His wife, Ngozi Okonkwo, came from old money. The daughter of a prominent Igbo industrialist, they lived in a massive compound in Ikoyi with their only child, Chidinma. On the night of March 15, 1993, Chidinma went to bed in her third floor bedroom at 9 p.m. as usual. The compound had state of the art security for the time, high walls, security guards, guard dogs, the works. The bedroom door was locked from the outside. Yes, you heard that right. Locked from the outside. Now, Chief Okonkwo insisted on this after Chidinma had a history of sleepwalking. Once, when she was 7, she had wandered out of the house and was found near the lagoon, almost a kilometer away. After that, they locked her in every night for her safety. That night, Chief Emeka and his wife Ngozi were at the annual Ikoyi Club Ball, a massive society event with over 300 guests. They had ironclad alibis. They returned home at 2 a.m., checked on Chidinma through the small window in the door, which they had installed specifically for the purpose, saw her sleeping peacefully, and went to bed. The next morning, when the housemaid Patience unlocked the door to wake Chidinma for school, the room was empty. The windows were locked from the inside. The door had been locked from the outside. There were security guards posted at the compound entrance at night. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. Chidinma Okonkwo had simply vanished. The investigation that followed was intense. The police questioned everyone, family members, staff, business associates, rivals, Chief Okonkwo's enemies, and a man that rich and powerful had many. They were all investigated. Theories flew around like pigeons at Ojuelegba. Kidnapping for ransom, but no ransom demand ever came. An inside job, but the staff had been with the family for years and none of them seemed suspicious. Ritual sacrifice, some people whispered this, but you know how people talk in Nigeria when rich men are involved, but there was no evidence. A runaway at 9 years old, unlikely. The case dominated Nigerian newspaper for months. Mrs. Ngozi appeared on televisions begging for her daughter's return. Tears streaming down her face. Chief Emeka offered a reward of 10 million naira, a fortune in 1993. But nothing came of it. The Okonkwo's marriage didn't survive. They divorced in 1995. Ngozi suffered a mental breakdown and was hospitalized multiple times. She died in 1998, officially from complications of malaria, but everyone knew it was a broken heart that killed her. Chief Emeka remarried quickly, had two more children with his new wife, moved to Abuja. The Lagos mansion was left to rot, a monument of tragedy and unanswered questions. And that's where the thing stood for 30 good years. Chidi was studying the drawings under a lamp. So what are you thinking? That the child knew something was going to happen to her? Amaka shook her head slowly. I think she was trying to tell someone something was already happening. Look at the date. The drawing is from her art class, the day she disappeared. She submitted this at school that afternoon. That night, she was gone. The figures in the window. Look at how it's drawn, Amaka pointed out. The other figures in the picture, the security guard at the gate, the gardener by the flowers, they're all standing up normal. But this figure in the window, it's horizontal, and these marks around it. It could be anything, curtains, decorations, or restraints, Amaka finished quietly. What if Chidinma wasn't drawing a fantasy or a nightmare? What if she was drawing what she could see from her window? Something or someone hidden in that house? Or what if she was drawing what she knew was happening to her? Amaga needed to know more about Mrs. Fumilayo Adeyemi. Why has she kept this drawing for 30 good years? What did her note mean? The child tried to tell me. The next morning, they headed to Chidinma Old School, Corona Primary School in Victoria Island. It was still operating, now modernized with computers and smart boards, but some of the older staff remained. The school administrator, Mrs. Titilayo Badmus, was in her 60s and remembered Mrs. Adeyemi very well. Ah, Madam Fumi, Mrs. Badmus said, her face softening with memory. She was a wonderful teacher, taught art class at Corona for 30 years before she retired in 2005, but she was never the same after that incident. Chidinma Okonkwo, Amaka asked gently. Mrs. Badmus nodded sadly. It destroyed her. She blamed herself terribly. Chidinma was in her class that year. Such a bright, talented child. Mrs. Adeyemi used to say Chidinma could have been a professional artist one day. Did Mrs. Adeyemi ever mention anything unusual about Chidinma's behavior before she disappeared? Chidi asked. Mrs. Badmus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Actually, yes. After Chidinma disappeared, Mrs. Adeyemi went through all of the girls' artwork from that thing. She said there was a pattern, that Chidinma had been drawing the same house over and over, but with small changes each time, dark changes. Amaka leaned forward. Do you know if Mrs. Adeyemi kept those drawings? She gave the originals to the police in 1993, but they didn't think they were relevant. Just a child's imagination, they said. Mrs. Dan Badmos paused. But I know Mrs. Adeyemi made copies. She studied them for years, trying to understand what she missed. She even took them to psychologists, trying to decode them. What would those copies be now? When she retired, she donated her entire collection to the school's archive. We have a small museum room for school history. Everything should be still there. And that, my people, is when things got really interesting. Ha! The archive room was in the basement of the school, a climate-controlled space filled with decades of school memories, trophies, photographs, old uniforms, report cards, and boxes, many, many boxes. Mrs. Batmore led them to a section labeled Adeyemi's collection. Inside box number 7, they found what they were looking for. Photocopies of 18 drawings by Chidinma Okonkwo, dated from January to March 1993. Mrs. Adeyemi had arranged them chronologically and written detailed notes in the margins, dates, observations, and questions. Amaka spread them out on a large table, creating a timeline. Now listen carefully to what they found, because this is where the story gets chilling. The first drawing from January were bright and cheerful, the Okonkwo's mansion in different scenarios. During the day, at sunset, the family cars in the driveway, the figures were typically for a child's drawing. Chidinma with her parents, stick figures but detailed, all smiling. But then, starting in late January, things began to change. In drawing number 4, a new figure appeared. It was in the background, near the boys' quarters of the compound, just a shadow, barely defined. By drawing 7 mid February, the shadow had formed tall, thin, humanoid, but somehow wrong. Like Chidinma couldn't quite capture what she was seeing. Look at this progression, Chidi said, arranging the drawings in order. It's like watching something emerge from darkness. In drawing 9, the family figure started changing. Chief Emeka became larger, more imposing, drawn with harsh strokes. Ngozi became smaller, almost transparent, and Chidinma drew herself in the window looking out. By drawing 12, the perspective had shifted entirely. You were no longer looking at the house from outside, you were looking from inside the windows, out at the compound. The edges of the window frame were visible in the drawing, and that figure, the shadow figure, was now inside the compound walls, closer. Jesus Christ, Amaka whispered. She was documenting something. Someone watching her, someone getting closer. The notes Mrs. Adeyemi had written were heartbreaking. January 12th, Chidinma seems happy, very engaged in class. January 28th, asked Chidinma about the extra person in her drawing. She became quiet, said it was just someone who lives there. Changed subject immediately. February 10th, Chidinma wore long sleeves today, despite the heat. I noticed marks on her wrist when she reached for supplies. When I asked, she said she felt playing, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. February 20, Chidinma asked me if children can run away from home. I asked why she was asking. She said just wondering, but looked so sad. March 5th, Chidinma's drawings are getting darker. Today, she used only black and red. When I asked what she was drawing, she said the truth. I didn't understand. Why didn't I push her to explain? March 14, Chidinma stayed after class. She looked at me for a very long time, like she wanted to say something important. I smiled and said, "What is it, dear?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally said, "Nothing, ma. Thank you for teaching me." It was the way she said thank you. So fine now, like goodbye. March 15, last drawing. Chidinma handed it in without a word. She looked exhausted. I said, "Lovely work, Chidinma." She didn't smile, just nodded and left. That was the last time I ever saw her. The last time. Why didn't I do more? Why didn't I see it? The final drawing, number 18, the one Amaka had found at the estate sale, was the most detailed and the most disturbing. The figure in the third room window was clearly Chidinma herself, lying down, surrounded by dark marks. But there was something else. In the bottom corner, so small you miss it if you weren't looking carefully, was another figure, standing in the doorway, tall, thin, and watching. Amaka pulled out her phone and started photographing every drawing, every note. Chidi, she was asking for help, the only way a frightened 9-year-old girl knew how to. Through her arts, and no one understood. Not her teacher, not her parents, not anyone. But who was she afraid of, Chidi asked. Who was the figure she kept drawing? Amaka studied the progression again, focusing on the last few drawings. In drawing 16, there was something she'd almost missed, a detail in the background, a door to what looked like the boys' quarters, and next to it, a name painted on the wall. She pulled out a magnifying glass. Yes, detective actually used these things. The name was partially visible, Kachi. Chukwuemeka, Ikechukwu, Kelechi, Chidi suggested common enough names. But Amaka was already on her phone, pulling up the old cases file she digitalized. The police interviewed all the household staffs in 1993. Let me see. She scrolled through the list. Patience Udo, housemaid. Sondo Keke, driver. Taiwo and Kehinde Adebayo, security guards. Emmanuel Obi, cook. Chiamaka Nnamdi, nanny. And then at the bottom of the list, Obiekachi Nwosu, houseboy, boys' quarters. Opikachi, Amaka read aloud. Age 19 in 1993. lived in the boys' quarters, responsible for compound maintenance, running errands, and helping with household tasks. She scrolled in to his interview notes. He'd been questioned by police and cleared. His statement said he'd been sleeping in the boys' quarters the night Chidinma disappeared. Heard nothing unusual. The security guards confirmed he hadn't left the compound. But there was a notation at the bottom of his file written by the investigating officer. Suspect seemed nervous during interview, but nothing concrete to pursue. Background check shows he was expelled from secondary school in 1990 for inappropriate behavior toward female students, but no charges filed. Family from Anambra State moved to Lagos for work. Now I know what you're thinking. That's not enough evidence to accuse someone. And you're right. But Amaka's instincts were screaming at her. She'd worked enough cases to know when something didn't add up. Where is Obikachi Nwosu now? She asked Chidi. After 30 years? It could be anywhere. Could be dead. Or, Amaka said quietly, he could still be in Lagos living a normal life with a secret. Now here is where modern technology comes in handy. In 1993, people could disappear easily. But in 2023, with social media, digital records, and databases, much harder. Amaka had a friend at the National Identity Management Commission, a tech-savvy woman named Zainab who owed her a favor. Amaka, you know I can't just give you personal information, Zainab said over the phone. I know, but this is about the Okonkwo case, the little girl who disappeared in 1993. Everyone knows that case. It's like Nigerian's version of an urban legend. It's not a legend, Z. It was real, and I think I can solve it. I just need you to search for someone, Obiakachi Nwosu, born around 1974 from Anambra State. Give me a few hours. While they waited, Amaka and Chidi decided to visit the Okonkwo's mansion. They needed to see the actual house, compare it to Chidinma's drawing, understand the layout. The mansion at Adeola Odeku Street stood like a ghost in the middle of Ikoyi's modern development. 30 years of abandonment had been cruel. The walls were cracked, covered in vines. The gates were rusted and chained. The garden was now a jungle. This place is like something from a horror movie, Chidi muttered. They found a section of the wall low enough to climb. The compound was massive, easily half an acre. The main house was 3 stories, just as Chidinma had drawn it. The boys' quarters were off to the side, a separate small building. The front door was boarded up, but the back entrance, a service door near the kitchen, had a broken lock. They pushed it open carefully. If we die in here, I'm going to be very upset with you, Chidi said. The interior was a time capsule of wealth and tragedy. Furniture remained, covered in dust and mold. Family photos still hung on walls, expensive rugs now rotted covered the floors. They made their way upstairs to the 3rd floor, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Chidinma's room was exactly as she had drawn it. A large bedroom with 3 tall windows overlooking the compound. The bed was still there, the mattress long since destroyed by time and elements, shelves of dolls and books, a desk covered in what had once been school supplies. And on the door, just as the case file described, a deadbolt lock on the outside. Amaka felt a chill run through her. They locked her in every night. A 9-year-old child locked in her room like a prisoner. For her safety, Chidi said, for his voice was hollow. Or so they believed. Amaka walked to the windows, looking out at the view Chidinma would have seen every day. From there, you could see the entire compound. The gates, the garden, the driveway, and yes, the boys' quarters. The boys' quarters had a small window that faced the main house. From Chidinma's window, you'll be able to see directly into it. Chidi, come look at this. They made their way carefully to the boys' quarters. The door was swollen with moisture, but gave way when Chidi put his shoulder into it. The interior was simple: a small room with a bed, a table, a wardrobe, a tiny bathroom, and a window. And on the wall next to the window, someone had carved words into the plaster. Chidinma, mine forever. 15th March 1993. The date Chidinma disappeared. But there was more. In the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a wardrobe, was a gap in the wall. When they moved the wardrobe aside, with considerable effort, they found a loosened panel. Behind it was a crawl space leading under the main house. Oh God, Amaka whispered. They followed the crawl space with their flashlights. He ran under the compound. Imagine inside the main house, directly below Chidinma's bedroom. And there, in that dark space, they found evidence that someone had spent time there. Old blankets, rotted with age, empty food containers, a bucket, and a small notebook. Each page is stuck together with moisture and mold, but still partially readable. Amaka carefully separated the pages. The handwritings were juvenile, repetitive. Chidinma, 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 Chidinma. Written hundreds of times. And then entries. January 5th, 1993, she smiled at me today when I brought her orange juice. She had the most beautiful smile. February 2nd, 1993, I watch her through the window at night. She doesn't know I can see her. She's so perfect when she sleeps. February 20th, 1993, she knows. I saw her looking at the boys' quarters today. She saw me watching, but she didn't tell. She wouldn't tell. She's mine. March 10th, 1993. Soon, Chief and Madam go out often. Leave her alone. I know where they keep the keys to her room. Soon, we'll be together forever. March 15th, 1993. Tonight, the ball at Ikoyi Club. They'll be gone until late. I've prepared everything. We'll live together. Start new life. Just us. She will understand. She will see I saved her. The entries ended there. Huh? Obikachimwatu had been obsessed with Chidinma and had been watching her, documenting her, planning, and on March 15, 1993, he'd taken her. Amaka's phone rang. It was Zainab. Amaka, I found him, Obikachimwatu, but you're not going to believe this. Zainab knew it was shocking, but in retrospect, it made perfect sense because Obikachimwatu hadn't disappeared. He simply became someone else. In 1995, a man named Obi Emeka Nwachukwu registered for a national ID card. Zainab explained over speakerphone. Born 1974 from Anambra State, clean records, no criminal history, employed as a social worker. That's not the same person, Chidi said. Wait, Zainab continued. I ran biometrics analysis, facial recognition using old photos of Obikachi from 1993. It's 94% match to Obi Nwachukwu's ID photo. Same person, new name. Where is he now? Amaka asked. That's the really interesting part. Obi Nwachukwu works for the Lagos State Child Protective Services. Has for 20 years. By all accounts, he's excellent at his job, rescuing children from abusive homes, placing them in foster care, helping trauma survivors. The irony was sickening. He's been around vulnerable children for 20 years? Ha! He lives in Surulere. I'm sending you the details now, but Amaka, there's more. According to property records, he also owns a house in Ekpe, a rural area outside Lagos, bought in 2005 under a different company name. But I traced the ownership back to him. Send me both addresses. After hanging up, Amaka and Chidi sat in silence for a moment. What do you think is in that house in Ekpe? Chidi finally asked. Amaka didn't want to say it out loud. Didn't want to give voice to the terrible possibility, but she had to. I think Chidinma might be there, or maybe she paused, or evidence of what happened to her. They decided to visit Obi's apartment in Sulere first. If he was there, they could confront him directly. If not, well, then they'll head to Ekpe. The building was modest but well maintained. Obi's apartment was at the third floor. The landlady, Mrs. Blessings Okafor, was suspicious at first but softened when she saw Amaka's badge. Oga Obi is a good tenant, she said. Very quiet, very respectful, pays rent on time, but I hardly see him. Maybe twice a week he sleeps here, otherwise he's always traveling for work or going to his other house, Chidi muttered quietly. Mrs. Blessing lets them into the apartment after checking their credentials thoroughly. The apartment was sparse, a place to sleep, not to live, one bedroom, minimally furnished, but the walls were covered with children's artwork, hundreds of pieces, all framed, all organized by date. These are from the children I work with, a voice said from the doorway. They spun around to find a man standing there, mid-40s, average height, thin build, wearing a simple shirt and jeans. His face was gentle, almost kind, but his eyes were watching them with intensity that made Amaka's skin crawl. Obi Wachuku, Amaka asked, her hand instinctively moving toward her service weapon. Yes, and you are police? I could tell from outside. His voice was calm, almost amused. The landlady called me. She doesn't let just anyone into her tenant's apartment, no matter what badges they flash. We need to talk to you about something that happened 30 years ago, Amata said carefully. Ah, you found out. He stepped into the apartment and Chidi moved to the back to exit. Obi noticed but didn't seem concerned. About Chidinma, you mean? The Okonkwo girl? The casual way he said her name made Amaka's blood run cold. Where is she? Amaka demanded. Obi smiled. Ah, sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. Saved her. Would you believe me if I said I saved her? Saved her from what? Her family, her home? From a life of being locked in a room like an animal, Obi said, his voice rising slightly, showing emotion for the first time. From parents who cared more about their social status than their daughter's happiness. From a mother who drugged her every night to keep her quiet. From a father who... He stopped abruptly. From a father who what? Still depressed. Obi was quiet for a long moment, then walked into one of the framed pieces of the wall. It was a child's drawing, but Amaka recognized the style immediately. The same precise detail, the same use of color. It showed a family of two, an adult figure labeled Papa Obi and a child labeled Dimma. She drew this last year, Obi said quietly. For my birthday. My people, let us sink in. Last year, meaning Chidinma was alive and she'd been with Obi for 30 good years. What happened next was one of the most intense interrogations of Amaka's career, and what Obi told them, well, it turned everything they thought the upside down. At the station, with the interview being recorded and a lawyer present, Obi had called one immediately. The story came out. I was 19 years old, Obi began. Just a village boy trying to make it in Lagos. Okonkwo hired me through a labor agent. I was supposed to do compound maintenance, errands, basic tasks. But from the first week I was there, I knew something was wrong in that house. Wrong? Wrong how? Amaka asked. Chidinma was like a prisoner. They locked her in her room every night. Yes, they claimed it was for her sleepwalking, but that girl had never sleepwalked in her life. I know because I watched. Every night for months, I watched from the boys' quarters. He never got up, never wondered. She just laid there, sometimes crying softly. And during the day, Chidi asked. During the day, she was the perfect daughter. Polite, obedient, quiet, too quiet for a 9-year-old. She was afraid of her father. You could see it in how she moved around him. Always careful, always small, always trying not to draw attention. Obi's hand clenched on the table. I started to notice other things. How Chief Okonkwo would come home late from business meetings and go straight to Chidinma's room. How the madam, Mrs. Ngozi, would take sleeping pills and be unconscious by 10 p.m. every night. How Chidinma started drawing those pictures, trying to tell someone, anyone that was happening, anything that was happening. The room went silent. Amaka felt sick because she knew where this was going. Are you saying Chief Okonkwo was abusing his daughter? I'm saying that child was being destroyed in that house and everyone was too blind to see it, or too afraid, or too paid off. Obi's voice was bitter. I was just a houseboy. Who would believe me if I reported it? Chief Okonkwo was one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. He had police commissioners, government, everyone in his pocket. So I watched and I planned. And when I saw Chidinma's drawing getting darker, when I saw her getting thinner, more withdrawn, when I heard her crying through the walls at night, I decided to save her. By kidnapping her? Chidi said flatly. By rescuing her, Obi corrected. March 15, 1993, I knew the Okonkwas would be at the Ikoyi Club ball. They went every year. I knew where they kept the spare keys to Chidinma's room. I'd been preparing for months, saved money, found a place in a village in Anambra where my aunt lived. I arranged everything. That night, I waited until 3 a.m. Everyone was asleep. The security guards were dozing. The other staff were in their quarters. I used the tunnel I discovered under the house, an old drainage system from where the house was built. It led right under the main building. I went into Chidinma's room. She woke up when I touched her shoulder. And you know what? She didn't scream. She looked at me and whispered, "Are you taking me away from here?" I said yes. And she said, "Thank you." Now, before you start thinking Obi is some kind of a hero, remember, he was a 19-year-old who abducted a 9-year-old child. Whatever his intentions, whatever the truth about Chief Okonkwo, this was still a crime. This was still kidnapping. Amaka leaned forward. What happened next? We left through the tunnel. I had a bag packed for her, clothes I bought, food, water. We walked to the main road and took a night bus to Onitsha. From there, we went to my aunt's village in Anambra. I told my aunt that Chidinma was my cousin's daughter, that her mother had died and her father was abusive, that I was protecting her. My aunt was kind. She didn't ask too many questions. For the first 6 months, we stayed hidden in the village. I changed Chidinma's name to Dimma, cut her hair short, told everyone she was my younger sister, and slowly, very slowly, she began to heal. Did she ever try to escape? Try to go back home? Chidi asked. Obi shook his head. That's what people don't understand. Chidinma didn't want to go back. She was terrified of going back. She had nightmares about her father for years. She begged me never to take her back to Lagos, never to let them find her. I kept her informed, you see. I bought newspapers, followed the news coverage. When she saw her mother on TV crying, asked for her return, Chidinma said Mama knew. She knew what Papa was doing, and she did nothing. She's crying for herself, not for me. This is the part where the story gets complicated, my people. Because if what Obi was saying was true, that's a big if. Then what was the right thing to do? Return a child to an abusive home or keep her hidden, stolen but safe? Amaka's mind was racing. The letters. You sent letters to Mrs. Ngozi. Obi nodded. Starting in 1994, Chidinma wanted her mother to know she was still alive and safe. She dictated them to me. Short letters saying she was happy, that she'd chosen to leave, that she had a new family. I mailed them from different cities so they couldn't trace us. Those letters tortured Mrs. Ngozi, Amaka said coldly. She died thinking her daughter had abandoned her. She died knowing her daughter had escaped her father Obi Kontad. Which truth was more important? At this point, Amaka knew she needed to hear from Chidinma herself because Obi's story was compelling. But it was still his version. The real truth could only come from the person who had lived it. Where is she now? Amaka asked. Where is Chidinma? Dimma, Obi corrected. She goes by Dimma Nwachukwu now. She's 40 years old. She has a life, a career, a fiancé who knows nothing about her past. And before you drag her into this, before you destroy everything she's built, you need to understand what you're doing. We are solving a crime, Chidi said. A 30-year-old kidnapping case. You're reopening a 30-year-old trauma, Obi shot back. For what? Justice? Whose justice? The justice of a dead woman who ignored her daughter's suffering? The justice of a powerful man who should have been in prison? Amaka took a deep breath. I need to speak with her. That's non-negotiable. But I'll be sensitive to her situation. You have my word. Obi studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She lives in Lekki. She's an art therapist. Works with traumatized children, helping them express their feelings through drawings, just like Mrs. Adeyemi helped her all those years ago. The next day, Amaka and Chidi went to Lekki to meet Chidinma Nwachukwu, formerly known as Chidinma Okonkwo, and the woman who opened the door, well, she was nothing like the frightened 9-year-old in those old photographs. Detective Okafor, she said calmly. Obi called me. He said you found Mrs. Adeyemi's drawing. I always wondered what happened to those. She invited them in, served them zobo and chinchin, and sat down with the composure of someone who'd been expecting these conversations for 30 years. Ask your questions, she said. Amaka pulled out the final drawings, the one from the estate sale. Can you tell me about this? What were you trying to say? Dimma looked at the drawings for a long time, her expressions unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but sad. That drawing is what I could see and what I feared. The figure in the window, that was me. But also not me. It was who I thought I would become if I stayed in that house, trapped, broken, disappearing. I was 9 years old. I didn't have the words to explain what was happening to me. My father, he never hit me, never left physical marks where people could see. But he invaded every part of my privacy with my dignity. He controlled everything. What I wore, what I ate, who I spoke to, what I thought. And my mother knew. She knew and she did nothing because she was terrified of him too. So she drugged herself to sleep every night and pretended everything was fine during the day. Why didn't you tell anyone explicitly? Your teacher, a friend, someone? Chidi asked. Because I tried, Dimma said, her voice cracking slightly. In small ways, I asked Mrs. Adeyemi if children could run away. I drew pictures showing what I felt. I wore long sleeves to hide the bruises on my wrist from where my father would grab me. But no one understood. Or maybe they didn't want to understand. It's easier to see a rich man's daughter as blessed rather than cursed. She took a deep breath, composing herself. The night Obi came to my room, I had already decided I wanted to die. I was 9 years old and I wanted to die. I've been planning how to do it. Maybe jump from my window, maybe find my mother's pills. But then Obi appeared and asked if I wanted to leave and I said yes. I said yes because I knew, even as a child, that whatever came next couldn't be worse than what I was already living. Amaka felt tears prick her eyes but kept her voice professional. Did Obi ever hurt you in all these years? Never, not once. He raised me like a brother raising a sister. He worked multiple jobs to pay my school fees. He protected me. He gave me a chance to heal. When I was old enough to understand everything, he told me the truth about who I was, what had happened. He said if I wanted to go back, he would face the consequences. But I didn't want to go back. I wanted to keep living as Demma. Your mother, Miss Ngozi, she suffered greatly after you disappeared, " Amaka said gently. She died still searching for you. Dimma's composure finally cracked. Tears rolled down her face. I know. I read about it. I sent those letters hoping she would understand I was okay, that she could stop suffering. But I couldn't go back, not while he was alive. I couldn't risk it. Your father, Chief Emeka, he's still alive, living in Abuja, Chidi informed her. I know. I've kept tracks of him over the years. He remarried, has other children. I wonder sometimes if it does to them what he did to me. But I'm too much of a coward to find out. There was a long silence. Amaka looked at this woman, successful, strong, having built a good life from the ruins of a terrible childhood, and she had to make a choice. The detective in her knew that this was a crime. Obi had kidnapped a child, but the human in her understood that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. What happens now? Demma asked. Are you going to arrest Obi? Make this public? Drag Chief Emeka Okonkwo into court? Amaka didn't answer immediately. I need to verify your story. Investigate Chief Okonkwo. If you're saying if what you're saying is true, he committed crimes against you that have no statute of limitation. And if you can't prove it, if it's just word of a kidnapped child against one of Nigeria's most powerful men, what then? That was the question, wasn't it? Amaka knew she had to tread carefully. Chief Emeka Okonkwo was still powerful, still connected. Accusing him of child abuse from 30 years ago, based solely on Dimma's testimony, would be career suicide. She needed evidence. She needed proof. She started with the household staff from 1993. Most had scattered, but she managed to track down three: Patience, the housemaid; Sunday, the driver; and one of the security guards, Taiwo Adebayo. Patience, now in her 60s and living in Ibadan, was reluctant to talk at first. Madam, that was 30 years ago. Why are you bringing up old trouble? Because a child's life matters, Amaka said firmly, even 30 years later. Patience was quiet for a long time on the phone. Then finally, that house was not right, too. The way Oga treated that girl, it was not right. But who was I to question? I was just a housemaid. I needed the job. What did you see, Patience, specifically? I saw Oga go to Chidinma's room late at night when Madam was asleep. I saw the girl become more and more quiet, more withdrawn. I saw Madam drinking more, sleeping more, crying when she thought no one was watching. But we all pretended not to see because in Nigeria, you don't question a chief. You don't question a rich man. Sunday, the driver, confirmed similar observations. Taiwo, the security guard, admitted he'd sometimes heard Chidinma crying. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Amaka remembered something from old case file. Chief Okonkwo had a personal physician, Dr. Adebayo Lawal, who had treated the family. She tracked him down to a retirement home in Victoria Island. Dr. Lawal was 82 now. His mind still sharp, but his conscience, it seemed, had been bothering him for decades. I knew, he said simply when Amaka asked about Chidinma. I knew what was happening to that child. I saw signs during examinations: emotional distress, anxiety, symptoms inappropriate for her age. I even saw physical signs that suggested improper contact. Why didn't you report it? Amaka asked, trying to keep the anger out of her voice. Because Chief Okonkwo made it very clear what would happen if I spoke. He would destroy my career, my family, my life. And I was a coward. I chose my comfort over a child's safety. I've lived with that choice every single day since then. Will you testify to this officially? Dr. Lawal looked at her with watery eyes. Detective, I am 82 years old with stage 4 cancer. I have maybe 6 months left. Yes, I'll testify. It's the least I can do before I meet my maker. With Dr. Slawal's testimony combined with the statement from the housemaid staffs and Dimma's own account, Amaka had enough to prove forward. But there was one more piece of evidence she needed. The house in Ekpe that Obi owned. Because if Obi had kept Chidinma there for any length of time, there might be physical evidence. Ekpe is about an hour from Lagos. Rural, quiet, the kind of place where you can disappear if you want to. The house Obi owned was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by palm trees and farmland. With a warrant in hand, Amaka and Chidi arrived with a forensic team. Obi had given them permission to search with Dema's blessings. The house was simple but well maintained. 2 bedroom, a living area, a kitchen. It looked like a weekend retreat, not a prison. But in one of the bedrooms, clearly Dema's old room, they found what Amaka had been looking for. The walls were covered with drawings, hundreds of them, a visual diary of Dema's healing process. The earliest drawing from the mid-90s were dark, violent images of rages, shadows of fears, but gradually they changed. Color returned, light returned, hope returned. By the early 2000s, the drawings showed a girl, then a young woman finding peace, images of freedom, of nature, of new beginnings. And in a box under the bed, carefully preserved, were notebooks, Dimma's journals from ages 10 to 25, documenting her recovery, her education. Obi had paid for her to attend university. Her journey to becoming an art therapist. Over the entry, one entry dated March 15, 2003, the 10th anniversary of her disappearance stood out. Today, I should be mourning the girl I was, but instead, I am celebrating the woman I've become. Obi gave me a choice that night: stay and die slowly, or live and live. I chose life, and yes, it was stolen. Yes, it was illegal. Yes, it was wrong by every law. But I'm alive. I am whole. I am healing, and I'm helping other children escape the darkness I lived through. If that makes me a criminal accomplice, accomplice, so be it. I'd rather be a living accomplice than a dead victim. The forensic team found no evidence of imprisonment, no signs of abuse, no indication that Dima had been held against her will until the initial abduction. What they found was evidence of a makeshift family trying to survive, heal, and build something good from something terrible. Amaka sat on the porch of that house at the sunset over Ekpe, Chidi beside her, both of them wrestling with impossible questions. What are we going to do? Chidi asked. I don't know, Amaka admitted. By the law, Obi committed kidnapping. He should be persecuted. But by any measures of human decency, he saved a child's life. And that child, now a woman, doesn't want justice. She wants to keep living in peace. And Chief Okonkwo should face justice for what he did. But it's been 30 years. Even with Dr. Lawa's testimony, with Dimma's account, circumstantial evidence, will the Nigerian court convict a powerful, wealthy man based on a decades-old allegation? You know as well as I do the answer is probably no. Chidi was quiet, so everyone gets away with it. No, Amaka said slowly. I'm going to give Dimma a choice. The same way Obi gave her a choice 30 years ago. I'll lay out her options, press charges against her father, which means going public with her story and risking everything, or stay silent, keep her new life, and let the past stay buried. Whatever she chooses, I'll support. And Obi's fate is tied to hers. If she presses charges and the story comes out, he will likely be persecuted too. If she chooses silence, then I have to decide if I can live with letting him go. 2 days later, Amaka met with Dima again. This time, she brought everything: the evidence, the testimonies, the legal options. She laid it all out on a table. You have three options, Amaka explained. One, you press criminal charges against your father for what he did to you. We have enough evidence to build a case, though I can't guarantee conviction. This option means your story becomes public. Your life as Dimma Nwachukwu ends. Everyone will know you are Chidinma Okonkwo. Two, you file a civil suit for damages, emotional distress, lost childhood trauma. This also becomes public but might be easier to win. Your father would face financial consequences, not criminal. Three, you do nothing. Keep living as Dimma. Let the past stay buried. Obi would likely avoid prosecution. Without your cooperation, there's no case. Your father faces no consequences. Dima sat silently, her fingers tracing the rims of her teacup. What would you do, detective? She finally asked. Amaka considered the question. Honestly, I don't know. I want to say I'd burn it all down, expose everything, fight for justice, but I've never walked in your shoes. I've never had to rebuild my entire life from trauma, so I can't judge whatever choices you make. My fiancé, the man said softly, Emeka. Yes, I'm marrying a man named Emeka. The irony isn't lost on me. He's a good man. He knows I have trauma in my past, but not the details. If this goes public, I'd have to tell him everything and risk losing him. Would you lose him? Chidi asked gently. I don't know. I like to think he'd understand, but can anyone really understand this level of complication? Dima stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Lagos skyline. This is Adeyemi's drawing. She said you found them at her estate sale. Do you have them with you? Amaka pulled out copies of all 18 drawings. Dima spread them out on her coffee table, seeing them for the first time in 30 years. I was so scared, she whispered. I was screaming for help in the only way I know how. And she tried to hear me, Mrs. Adeyemi. She really tried. I never blamed her for not understanding. How could she? How could anyone imagine what I was living through? She picked up the final drawing, the one with her figure in the window, surrounded by darkness. I was drawing my own death, she said, or my disappearance. I knew something had to change. Either someone would save me, or I would save myself by ending it. Obi just happened to arrive before I did something irreversible. She turned to face Amaka and Chedi. I want option 4. But there's no option 4, Amaka said, confused. Yes, there is. I want to confront my father. Privately. Not in a courtroom, not in the media. Just me, him, and the truth. I want to look him in the eye and tell him what he did to me. What he stole from me. And then I want to walk away and never think about him again. That's not how this works, Chidi said. Then make it work, Dema said firmly, because if you force me into a courtroom, if you make this public without my consent, you're taking away my choice just like everyone else did. You're making decisions for me instead of with me. And you know what? She was right. In trying to pursue justice, Amaka had been on the verge of committing the same violation, taking away Dema's agency, deciding what was best for her without asking what she really wanted. Okay, Amaka said slowly. Okay, I'll arrange it. A meeting between you and Chief Okonkwo, private, controlled environment. You said what you need to say. After that, you decide if you want to pursue legal actions or not. And Obi, the man asked, if you don't press charges against your father, I don't pursue charges against Obi. But he needs to understand no more secrets, no more hiding. If he's been watching over other children, if there's any suggestion he's repeating this pattern, all bets are off. He hasn't, Dema said firmly. I would know. I've spent 30 years with him. He saved one child, and that was me, and has spent the rest of his life working within the system to save others. He's not a predator. He's just someone who made an impossible choice when he was too young to understand all the consequences. Arranging a meeting took 2 weeks. Chief Emeka Okonkwo, now 73 years old, initially refused, but when Amaka mentioned she had evidence of historical child abuse and was willing to go public, his lawyer suddenly became very cooperative. The meeting took place in Abuja at a private conference room in a five-star hotel. Present were Chief Okonkwo and his lawyer, Dimma and Obi, Amaka and Chidi, and a court stenographer to record everything. Chief Okonkwo looked old. Age and perhaps guilt had withered him, but his eyes still held that arrogance, that assumption of power and control. When Dimma walked in, his face went white. Chidinma, he whispered. Dimma, she corrected. Chidinma died 30 years ago. I am Dimma now. They sat across from each other at a large table. The tension in the room was suffocating. What happened next was one of the most intense conversations Amaka had ever witnessed. I'm going to share with you, but be warned, it's heavy. It's real. It's the kind of truth that makes you uncomfortable. Do you know why I'm here? Dimma asked her father, her voice steady. Chief Okonkwo looked at his lawyer, who nodded permission to speak. You want money and inheritance something? Chidinma laughed bitterly. I don't want your money. I want you to acknowledge what you did to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Every night, after Mama took her sleeping pills, after the staffs went to their quarters, after everyone else was asleep, you would unlock my door and come into my room. That's a lie, Chief Okonkwo said, but his voice wavered. Is it? Should we ask Dr. Lawal? He examined me. He saw the signs. He knew. Or should we ask Patience the housemaid? Or Sunday the driver? Or any of the dozen people who worked in that house and saw but said nothing because they were afraid of you? Chief Okonkwo's lawyer leaned over to whisper to him. He pushed the lawyer away. You were my daughter. I loved you. But you destroyed me, Dima said, her voice breaking slightly. I was 9 years old, and you destroyed me. You made me afraid to sleep, afraid to exist, afraid to be in my own body. You locked me in that room like a prisoner and convinced everyone it was for my safety, but it wasn't for my safety, it was for your access. Chifukonkwo's face had gone grey. His hands were shaking. I was ill, he sighed finally. I was going through a difficult time, business stress, personal issues. I wasn't myself. You were yourself, Dema countered. You were exactly yourself. And that's what terrifies me. That you were perfectly sane, perfectly aware of what you were doing. And you did it anyway because you knew you could get away with it. Because you were rich and powerful and I was a child. What do you want from me? Chief Okonkwo asked. And for the first time, there was fear in his voice. I want to hear you say it out loud. No euphemisms, no excuses. I want you to say what you did. The room went silent. Even his lawyer seemed to be holding his breath. Chief Okonkwo looked at his daughter. Really looked at her for the first time. And perhaps he saw the child she'd been, the woman she had become, the strength in look it took to sit across from him. I hurt you, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. I I violated your trust. I did things a father should never do. I was I was sick. I needed help. I didn't get it, and you paid the price. It wasn't a full confession. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The man nodded slowly. Thank you. That's all I needed to hear. She stood up. Wait, Chief Okonkwo said. What happens now? Are you going to press charges and ruin me? The man looked down at him. This man, who had once held absolute power over her life. No, she said. I'm not going to press charges. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I deserve peace. I'm not going to spend the next years of my life in courtrooms, reliving trauma, fighting you. You've already taken enough of my life. I won't give you any more. But know this, I have given my full testimony to Detective Okafor. It's been recorded, documented, corroborated. If you ever hurt another child, if I ever hear rumors, if there's even a whisper of you repeating this pattern, I will burn your whole world down. I will use every resource, every platform, every connection I have to destroy you. Do you understand? Chief Okonkwo nodded mutely. Good. Then we are done. You will never see me again. You will never contact me. As far as you're concerned, Chidinma Okonkwo died 30 years ago. And honestly, she did. Dema turned and walked out of the room. Obi and Amaka followed her. And that, my people, was how the confrontation ended. Not with justice in the legal sense, but with something perhaps more valuable: truth, acknowledgement, and closure on Dima's terms. Of course, this story couldn't stay completely private. Too many people knew pieces of it, and Amaka had to file some kind of official report to close the cold case. After consulting with Dima, they decided on a carefully crafted public narrative. The official statement announced that Chidinma Okonkwo had been found alive and well, living under a different identity. She had left her family home in 1993 due to unsafe conditions and had been taken in by a family friend, Obi, unnamed, who raised her. Now an adult, she had chosen to maintain her new identity and did not wish to reconnect with her biological family. The statement noted that historical allegations of abuse had been made against Chief Emeka Okonkwo, but that the now adult survivor had chosen not to pursue criminal charges. The case was being closed as resolved, with the survivor's wishes respected. It was carefully worded to protect Chidinma's privacy, while hinting at the truth for those who could read between the lines. The reaction was explosive. Social media went crazy. Justice for Demma, justice for Chidinma, trending for weeks. Even though Demma herself wasn't seeking the kind of justice. People debated whether Obi was a hero or a criminal. Whether Chief Okonkwo should be prosecuted regardless of Demma's wishes. Whether the police should have done more in 1993. Some praised Dimma's courage in confronting her father. Others criticized her for not pressing charges, saying she owed it to potential future victims. Mrs. Adeyemi's role in trying to see the truth in those drawings became a focal point. Art therapists across Nigeria shared the story, using it to train others on recognizing signs of trauma in children's artwork. But the most interesting reaction came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the story broke, a woman named Blessing Okonkwo, Chief Emeka's current wife, filed for divorce and gave an interview to a major Lagos newspaper. In it, she revealed that she'd always suspected something was wrong about Chidinma's disappearance, that Chief Emeka had forbidden her from ever discussing his first daughter, and that she'd felt increasingly uncomfortable with how he interacted with their own daughters. I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner, Blessing said in the interview. But Dimma's courage gave me courage. I'm protecting my children now, and I want other women to know if something feels wrong, it probably is. Speak up, protect your children, even if it means going against powerful men. The interview sparked a national conversation about child abuse, about how families protect powerful members of the at the expense of vulnerable ones, about how trauma can be hidden in plain sight. And surprisingly, dozens of people came forward with their own stories. People who'd been silenced, who'd never felt safe enough to speak, who'd been waiting for someone else to go first. It wasn't the tidy ending you see in movies. It was real, messy, complicated, imperfect, but real. 6 months after the story broke, Amaka received an invitation in the mail. It was a wedding invitation. Demawa Chuku and Emeka Edebeye were getting married. The venue was beautiful, an outdoor garden in Lekki decorated with artwork created by the children Dima worked with. The ceremony was small, intimate, just close friends and family. Dima had told Emeka everything, all of it, and he'd stayed. She worried I'd run, Emeka told Amaka at a reception. But how could I? She's the strongest person I've ever met. What she survived, what she built from it, I'm honored she chose to share her life with me. Obi was there too, walking Dimma down the aisle, since she had no father to do it. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience when he handed her over to Emeka, whispering something that made her smile through her tears. Later at the reception, Dimma pulled Amaka aside. Thank you, she said, for giving me a choice, for not forcing me into a box labeled victim or survivor, but letting me be just me. You did all the hard work, Amaka replied. I just helped clear the path. Still, you believed me. You listened, and you gave me the power to decide my own ending. That's rare. They stood together watching the celebration, people dancing to Afrobeats, children playing, laughter filling the air. Did you ever regret it? Amaka asked, not pressing charges against him. Then I thought about it. Sometimes I think about all the what ifs, but then I remember I'm here, I'm happy, I'm healing, I'm helping other children find their voices. That's my justice. It may not satisfy everyone, but it satisfies me. And really, isn't that what matters most? The story of Chidinma Okonkwo, or Dimma Nwachukwu, as she preferred, didn't end with a wedding. It continued in ways both expected and surprising. Dima and Obi partnered with Amaka to create a foundation called Drawing Truth, an organization that trained teachers, social workers, and parents to recognize signs of trauma in children's artwork. They held workshops across Nigeria, teaching people to look deeper, listen closer, and act faster. Mrs. Adeyemi's collection of drawings was donated to the foundation and became the centerpiece of a traveling exhibition about child trauma and recovery. Schools across Nigeria hosted the exhibition, sparking thousands of conversations about children or child's protection. The Lagos State Police Command, inspired by Amaka's work, created a specific cold case unit. They reopened dozens of unsolved disappearances from the 80s and 90s using modern techniques and new perspectives. Three cases were solved in the first year alone. Chief Emeka Okonkwo's empire began to crumble. Business partners quietly distanced themselves. His political connections dried up. His reputation, once unassailable, became toxic. He didn't face criminal charges, but he faced something perhaps worse for a man like him: irrelevance and disgrace. And most importantly, children began to speak up. Inspired by Chidinma's story, children across Nigeria would be suffering in silence. They found courage. Hotlines were overwhelmed with calls. Schools reported dramatic increase in abuse disclosures. It was painful, difficult work, but necessary. As for Amaka, she kept the final drawing, the one from Mrs. Adeyemi's estate frame, framed in her office, a reminder that truths can hide in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest messages, and that justice isn't always about courtrooms and convictions. Sometimes it's about giving people the power to write their own endings. 1 year after the wedding, Dema gave birth to a daughter. She named her Fumilayo, after Mrs. Adeyemi. I want her to know, Dema told Amaka when she visited the hospital, that even when adults fail to understand, even when the world seems dark, there are always people trying to see the truth. Mrs. Adeyemi tried, you tried, and one day, when Fumi is old enough, I'll teach her to try too. So what's the moral of this story, you might ask? What lessons should we take home? Maybe if it's maybe if this children are always speaking, sometimes with words, sometimes with behavior, sometimes with art. Our job as adults isn't to dismiss their expression or just imagination or just a phase. Our job is to pay attention, to look deeper, to ask questions, and to believe them when they answer. The truth really was hidden in a child's drawing. But the bigger truth is that children are always leaving clues, always asking for help, always hoping someone will see. The question is, are we watching closely enough? 2 years after this case closed, I had a chance to review Detective Amaka Okafor for this video. I asked her what stayed with her most about the Chidinma Okonkwo's case. She told me this. You know, people always want neat endings. They want the bad guy to go to jail, the victim to be victimized, justice to be served in capital letters. But life isn't like that. Real justice is messier, more complicated. Chidinma didn't get her day in court. Obi wasn't prosecuted for kidnapping. Chief Okonkwo was never saw in the inside of a prison cell. But a child who was being destroyed was saved. A woman built a meaningful life from trauma. Dozens of other children were helped because of her courage. Is that justice? I don't know. But it's something, and sometimes something is enough. The real lesson for me about listening, really listening. Mrs. Adeyemi saw those drawings in 1993 and sensed something was wrong, but she didn't trust her instinct enough to push harder. The household staff saw signs but stayed silent out of fear. Even Chidinma's mother saw the truth but kept quiet. How many children are drawing their truths right now? How many children are crying for help in ways we are not trained to recognize? That's what keeps us up at night. But it's also what keeps me going because for every child we miss, there's another we can save if we just pay attention, if we just believe, if we just act. And for that, my people, is the story of how the truth was hidden in a child's drawing. It's a story about trauma and survival, about impossible choices and complicated justice, about the power of art to speak when words fail. But more than anything, it's a reminder that children trust us to see them, hear them, and protect them. And when we fail in that trust, the consequences can last a lifetime. So the next time a child shows you a drawing, look closely, really look. Because sometimes they're not just drawing your imagination, they're showing you their truth. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please share it. If you know a child who needs help, please act. And if you're a survivor yourself, please know your truth matters, your voice matters, and you are not alone. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep searching for truth. This has been the truth that was hidden in a child's drawing.